we were discussing previously about Alive or Just Breathing being such a huge record in terms of not only for you guys but also for the metal genre in itself. So it's almost 21 years old now. So how does that record still sit with you? Like how's it still feeling to play those songs live?
I love that record. It's funny too because there's some records in my past and I'm like, ugh. And don't get me wrong, I can finally sing much better than I could on that record, but you can't really replace a feeling in a time frame, and I think it really captured who we were, what was going on around us, and how we were affected by it. It's really a snapshot of all of our lives as musicians and people. It reflects the times, but I also think we were pushing the times. We were taking our influences and going, okay, well, we like these bands, a hardcore band, a metal band, a death metal band, a punk band. How do you kind of mash it all together to make what we're doing? And it really does. If we were to do a show on Alive or Just Breathing, I could list like 20 or 30 bands that we were all influenced by, and everyone could go listen to them and go, okay, I can see where that came from, where that came. So we're kind of cherry picking off of our influences. And I think there's a magic to that, and somehow sounded original to a lot of people and fresh. But since then we've just continued to do that format and hopefully expand a little bit. But there's definitely yeah, there's a magic to that record, so I still love it. And it reminds me of a younger me, which I kind of chuckle about now because I was just a kid. I was a kid. I was, 22 years old, 23. In my experience of the world, not having traveled the world, a northeastern hardcore kid. And now, I'm traveled the world. I'm an old man. I've got gray hairs and perspective. And I love the ideas that kid had when he wrote that record. But also I chuckle because I realize how gullible he was, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see that for sure. I still remember we have like a music channel over here, Channel V. I was 18 and Life to Lifeless came on and I had to stop and go, what the fuck was that? And then
Mm.
straight away, like this is pre, Spotify days and all that. You're searching straight away, like who was that band and how do I get that record? It got
Yeah.
me straight away.
Yeah, I miss those days where you really had to be obsessed with it to know what it is. I would do the same thing. I'd go to shows constantly, write down names of bands, and if they didn't have merchandise, I would wait and go to the local record store and check in and wait 6 weeks for the album to come in. Like that was a magical time. Yeah, nowadays you just type it in or type in the lyrics and Google tells you right away.
That's it. Yeah.
Spoiled. Kids are spoiled.
Yeah, yeah. And I feel like the whole ritual of going to the store or doing your 6 week pre order, like there was a magic in that.
Really was. Yeah, my hands would be shaking when I'd open up, a record that I'd been waiting for from a band that I saw, 6 months ago at a VFW hall, and a hardcore band that signed to a label and they're putting out their first label after having all their little 7-inch records. And back then it was like a lot of the recordings were do it yourself for hardcore and punk, so you didn't have good sounding records. And then when the CD came along and bands started to like record records, that was exciting to hear a band that you saw live that sounded like shit that you loved get into a proper studio and put out an actual record. To be able to see both sides of that in the hardcore scene and the metal scene and the crossover stuff where, I still have records. I'm sitting next to a stack of records. Some of these things are like, they sound horrible. They're just horrible records. But
Wow.
man, when like Piebald's first 7-inch,
Oh
like,
shit.
So that's like, is
Wow.
that handwritten?
yeah, Shelter, like first pressing, like nerd stuff. And some of that stuff sounds horrible. And then when
Yeah.
and then when they got to the studio and recorded an actual record, you heard the band's full potential in your ears, and it was like, whoa, this is heavy. Whoa, I never noticed like the groove here. So I love all that shit.
So
Yeah,
good.
that's wicked, man. Going back to Alive or Just Breathing, I've always admired how open and sharing you are with, mental health online. When that record was on the rise and the success that came with the record, were you able to sort of stop and smell the roses there, or was your mental health at a time, was it sort of clouding a lot of those highs?
I think there was a lot, I first of all, I didn't have a language for what I was thinking and feeling. I later on in life realized, I had been dealing with depression and anxiety since I was a kid, but it's not something I really ever talked about. And if anything, I would just medicate with, back then smoking so much weed, which didn't help for my social situation. I was awkward, raised in a fundamentally Christian home. So I was sort of like a pastor's kid. So my social cues and the way I grew up, and then, taking on the hardcore scene and falling in love with the punk rock scene, I was always that like kid that was awkward and like didn't know a lot about stuff and was kind of a dork. Like I always say, I was like the Flanders kids. Like I grew up like the fucking Flanders kids, and then I became a punk and got into hardcore. So all that caused a lot of awkwardness in me, and I didn't really have a language for what was going on here. So instead of talking about it, I would just escape. Early days of Killswitch, I'd show up half hour before the set, play the set, and bail and just leave. I wouldn't watch other bands. I wasn't even a part of the scene. I was dealing with crazy anxiety, and I didn't know how to deal with that. So once I started to get recognized, we're on tour and kids are showing up early because they want to meet me and starting to sign autographs, which to me was like so not punk rock. I felt guilty. I was like, no, like, that whole idea of like the stage shouldn't be a barrier. It's your stage. Come up, stage dive, sing along. Like it's your band too. And when that started to happen to me, I started freaking out. I could not handle it. So there was no basking at all. It was me being nervous, being anxious, and then, pushing so hard because we're playing 3 shows and I'm going back to work on Monday. We're not touring full time. So once I got out there and started playing more than 3 shows, I was starting to lose my voice because I'm just up there going for it. If you watch any of the early Killswitch stuff from like 2000, 2001, you can see it. I'm like pushing with all my might to get those screams out. No technique whatsoever. So between my voice just like not working properly and my head not working properly, that's eventually what led me to just pull the ejector seat and get out of there without any regard to how it would affect my friends, without any regard to how it would affect my career, my life. I just knew that if I didn't do that, I probably would have ended up dead, like suicidal, like in a dark fucking place. So I chose life, and people can say what they want about it, but in the long run, it kind of worked out. So,
oh, it's very brave, man. Like you having to do that at that point, like would have taken a lot to do that. I understand that completely.
Yeah, to me, it just wasn't worth it. The prospect of having this big career or money or any of that stuff. And don't get me wrong, if my voice worked better, maybe I would have stuck it out a little longer, but I was embarrassed. I felt like a failure. I'm out there and I can barely sing anymore, scream, anything. My voice was just gone. I felt like a total idiot and a failure. And I got 4 guys looking at me like, we just got started with this shit. What's going on?